soup.
What's up everyone? Following the love from my previous top 3 creative builds video, I wanted to talk about 3 more creative builds that showcase weapon combos you don't see a lot and how you can make it work. While I've seen a lot of number crunching videos and this or that, I wanted to offer a fusion of those types of builds with less meta restrictions to showcase things that can be created. These builds feature fun aesthetics, but hopefully I can bring some ideas and pros and cons to back it up on a realistic standpoint. Lastly, some of these builds may not be the most optimized, and maybe you can help me down below in the comments on how to optimize it better. Like that little plug. A lot of these will be hybrid builds, meaning late game you'll need to optimize gear and gems to make them really work, but New World should be fun and you should rock whatever combo fits you the best, whether for PvP, PvE, aesthetics, or just for the hell of it. For this episode, and with Halloween coming up before you know it, we're going to make it a bit spookier. Monsters are about, and we need someone to hunt them. Originally, I was going to do a pure Halloween themed one, but that led me down this rabbit hole of monster hunting. Thus, these 3 builds will be based off the popular Witcher series, a personal favorite of mine. So let's talk about the Witcher, the Vampire, and the Wild Hunt.
Who's this one?
Brave warrior, looks like. Got 2 swords, see?
Oi, great boy. What's the point of having 2 swords?
Wonder if he keeps an extra prick in his trousers too.
I'm a witcher. Heard you wondering about my swords. Well, one's for monsters, the other for humans. Only got 1 prick though, in case you're wondering about that too.
The Witcher build. Those who have been experimented on to become masterful monster hunters become a legendary Witcher like Geralt of Rivia or Vesemir with this sword and rapier build. 1 for humans and 1 for monsters. With the build, we're going to focus primarily on dex, putting most of our points in there, though we're going to drop 50 points in the Constitution. That's going to be a common theme across these builds I have as I've kind of learned more and kind of adjusted, while making sure that we can have fun with these builds, make sure it's still somewhat meta. So we're going to make sure we have Constitution at the very least. I think 50 is a minimum for all builds, and you can adjust these numbers based off your playstyle. As you can see with the sword, we are not going to rock the shield. Witchers aren't really known for using shields, and definitely not the ones that we follow in the books and the shows and the video games. So we're not going to run the shield build with the sword, which poses as a threat because the shield build is definitely the viable build with the sword at the moment, but we're going to focus more heavily on the sword mastery here. I'm going to kind of talk you through. We'll be running reverse stab, whirling blade, and leaping strike. I think these 3 abilities are still really strong, and you typically see 1 to 2 of them in the shield builds. Typically for a lot of the shield builds with sword and shield, you'll have shield rush and shield bash plus 1 of those 3, just depending on what it's for. So I think the abilities are fine, and we're going to be putting more points in. As you can tell, a lot of these passives are going to have more focus on empowerment and damage, and that's going to help pick up on the lack of the normal heavy CC that the shield gives you. The rapier is going to be a grace build. I think it's the stronger of the 2, and the way I have it imagined right now, and we'll talk about this more later, is the rapier is going to be more heavy for the PvP, and I think grace is the better for the PvP, and you'll be running evade, riposte, and fleche. Hopefully I said those names right, because I did not Google beforehand, so I have no idea if I did or not. But those are going to be the abilities that we rock with this build. In terms of other things, some of these builds we have to have heavy specific gems or anything like that to make it work. Luckily with this, they both scale dex, so we don't have to worry too much about that, but you still need to optimize your gear so much. So let's go into the pros and cons of the Witcher build. The pros: you have good damage, especially rapier and PvP with that build, and max dex, it's really strong. So you have really strong damage overall, and both weapons take dex scaling, as we mentioned before. And lastly on the pros, you get to be badass and say your rapier is for humans and your sword is for the corrupted and lost. I mean, that's a pro in my opinion. For the cons, no hard crowd control. It's definitely not a crowd control heavy build. It's more slashing and dicing and that type of stuff. So that is a con if you're looking for that though. That's more up to your playstyle. And I recommend avoiding the shield. However, if you are not going to do the fun rapier for PvP only and sword for PvE only thing, you might need to slap a shield on to make it more PvP viable, but in my opinion, that's lame and don't do that. So, but that is a con, is that the sword without the shield build is definitely a little bit weaker. On top of what we gotta talk about, you will get bonus points with this build. If again, you use the sword only for PvE and the rapier only for PvP, or vice versa, depending on what you want to do, but one sword for monsters, one sword for humans, you gotta stick with that, bonus points if you do that. And another set of bonus points if you specialize in alchemy crafting, so you can be like a witcher, making your own potions to further empower you. But yeah, that is the Witcher build.
Start praying now.
Next up, the one I personally am most excited about, the vampire build. Near immortal, blood-drinking monstrosities become a step above human and an enemy to all mankind with this hatchet and magic build. Specifically when it comes out, Void Gauntlet. Now before I get into this, a quick note from me in the past. The vampire build. Guys, the vampire build. Hatchet, Void Gauntlet, I mean, come on. It's so sick. Alright, so many of you guys know I made the Balrog video. I posted it yesterday and all that stuff talking about that build. I'm actually going to alter this. Now that I came up with this build idea literally like an hour after I finished making the Balrog video. But instead of running Hatchet or Great Axe, we're going to run Hatchet with the Fire Staff and run it that way until the Void Gauntlet comes out, and then swap from Fire Staff to the Void Gauntlet on that release. So, but guys, the vampire build, how sick is that? So it's going to be using the Void Gauntlet, and obviously this weapon's not out yet, but through data mine and teases that Amazon Game Studios put out and everything, we know it is coming. I doubt it'll be on launch, but it will come out. Assuming it's not on launch, we're going to be not talking about what we should run specifically, but I recommend still running a Int Fusion build with the hatchet like you will be doing with the Void Gauntlet, and we'll talk about that later. But if you're not going to run that, I would suggest running Fire Staff or Ice Gauntlet in the meantime until the Void Gauntlet comes out and we can unlock our true vampire power. And also, like I mentioned before, once the Void Gauntlet does come out, I'll be swapping over from my Balrog build to this build on live, so make sure to watch my stream and future videos for updates on this build, because I think this is a really fun build. And it's something I think I'm going to be running for most of my new world career, at least for the foreseeable future. So this is the build. So this build is going to be an int conversion build. So you can see we have 150 in int and 50 in con. Like I said before, make sure we get some con in. So by int conversion, I mean we're going to be getting a convert % damage to some type of magic type gem in our hatchet. Initially, this would be fire or cold if you're running one of those two, but when the Void Gauntlet comes out, it would be to void damage. And the reason why is because that scales off of your weapon damage or your intelligence, whatever is higher. So you run it with the intelligence here, and you'll get the max damage out of your magic weapon, while also getting really strong, if not equal to or greater damage with your hatchet, because it'll still convert over, and so you won't be falling super far behind. And the numbers work behind it, so this makes it super viable and super, super strong. The abilities we'll be running is Feral Rush, Berserk, and right now Infected Throw. We're going to see how it goes, because I think Infected Throw overall is kind of weaker, and so we might swap out the Raging Torrent for PvP, but Infected Throw is a bit more vampire-y with throwing out this disease-souled axe that's more undead and decaying. But the idea behind this build, especially with Feral Rush and Berserk, is that you're going to have heavy lifesteal, and that's what the whole vampire is that comes here with the hatchet, is this lifesteal. As you kind of go in and you're clawing and biting and scratching up the enemy and just monstrously consuming their life force. Or, when you're not up and close and personal with the hatchet per se, you got your magic like a vampire does. So with the Void Gauntlet, and these are abilities that, while I think are 100% confirmed to be in it, the numbers are going to be different, so we're not going to focus too much on that. But these are the Void Gauntlet abilities. We'll be rocking the King Orb, which you shoot out this orb out and it comes back. And when the orb is going out, it deals damage, and when it comes back, it heals. So this is your vampiric, blood-sucking magic ability. We'll be rocking Draining Tethered. This is a really good ability for this build because we'll also be rocking Void Blade and the Hatchet. So it helps as you kind of tether yourself. You are empowered as you get closer. You throw that decaying orb out. You go in tethering an enemy, and then you pop the Void Blade, which is badass. necrotic blade that you use and attack with, and then we'll also be rocking void conversion for all that goodness. So what this means is that you'll be charging in, throwing out that decaying orb, starting with the void gauntlet, and then when you get a bit lower, you swap over the hatchet and do some more life stealing with that. And if you ever get close to death, which would be a shocker with how much sustain we have, but if you ever do, we then have Defy Death from the hatchet, which will give us short immortality for 3 seconds as of now, which means this is a very hard build to kill, which is awesome. So yeah, in the meantime, before Void comes out, just run another Int Magic and do the same conversion, and when it comes out, you can unleash the full potential of the vampire build. And all you need to do is make sure you have an Amethyst Gem in your hatchet, and you are good to go. Pros and cons of the vampire build. Pros, I mean, come on, this build is badass. The Void Gauntlet alone is a pro. It has insane lifesteal and monstrous combos with going in with Decaying Orb, Tether, and Blade. Then Blade runs out, you swap over the hatchet, so really good lifesteal and combos between those lifesteal options. As I mentioned before, if you ever get low enough with your lifesteal and con, your hatchet is undying, so it's really hard to kill past lifesteal. I mean, this is an incredibly strong skirmish build and dueling build. The one-on-one potential with this, or the small-scale PvP, is really strong with this type of build. And the Decaying Orb does make the bigger wars a bit more viable. But on that note, the cons, because of that, it's not the most AoE damage-focused build. Like, you have the Decay Orb and everything, but you don't have a lot of AoE, so when it comes to these big open wars, like the actual sieges, and you're fighting on the capture points, you don't have the biggest AoE damage. You have a decent amount, but it's not the most amount, so you might fall a little flat on damage there. But that's just up to your playstyle. It makes up otherwise, but it's not the best war build, I don't think. And then with the abilities we took on the Void, we don't have any hard CC with this build. We have a lot of chase potential with Berserk and everything, but no hard CC, so you could change the Void abilities. A couple others, one's like a suck ability and things, so you could change others if you want to do that, if you feel like you need the CC to keep up and stay in range, but that's up to you. Again, this one's a bit more theory crafting than the others just because we're talking about an item that is not out yet. And then lastly, the weapons don't cross over in attributes, but luckily, int scaling with gems, with the elemental gems, is still really strong at the moment, so it's not viable with that. It's actually very viable still, but you do put yourself a bit more in a thin line with what kind of gear you can get because of the lack of crossover. This is an awesome build. Bonus points if you rock the vampire cosmetic outfit, and if you talk with an Eastern European accent in proximity chat at all times. Awesome build. I'm super pumped. And lastly, the Wild Hunt build. An undead frozen terror galloping across the sky, the Wild Hunt is an ancient order of believed specters and some of the most fearsome enemies any Witcher has ever had to deal with. Join the hunt if you dare with this Ice Gauntlet Warhammer build. So as you mentioned, it's going to be Ice Gauntlet Warhammer, just like the Vampire build. We are going to do an int scaling build with this. We're going to focus more on the Ice Gauntlet as your primary weapon damage, with the Warhammer being scaled with your intelligence. With this kind of scaling, the Warhammer has never been like a big DPS build, so that's okay that you're not going to have the greatest damage with this scaling, but it'll still be strong. So we'll be rocking the 150 intelligence, 50 constitution, and then with the ice magic, you'll be running Ice Storm, Ice Shower, and Entombed. These are still the 3 strongest Ice Gauntlet abilities at the point of making this video. This build is really strong for PvP. I highly recommend it. Ultimate Chill is incredibly strong at the moment in my opinion, and this works super well with this being a monstrous terror upon the night hunting down your enemies. And then on that note, when you do slow them down and trap them, you want to get close and rock them with the Warhammer. Now in the game, there are some hunt who use mauls and that kind of thing, and some who use swords, but the swords they use are great swords, and without a great sword in the game, we're going to focus more on the ones who use the mauls, so in this instance, the Warhammer. Again, this is another really strong PvP combo with Shockwave, Clear Out, and Path of Destiny. Highly recommend these trees. The Warhammer pairs well with a CC heavy build of hunting down your enemies. So this is again very CC heavy, really strong build, and it really helps you get into that fantasy element of being this monstrous icy hunter and just locking down your enemies. So pros, as I mentioned, easily one of the best, if not the best crowd control build. Ice Gauntlet slows, Warhammer hard CC, it's great. The build also has great AoE with all the activations and how the weapons work. And then with the high intelligence, your Ice Gauntlet will do a strong amount of damage and the Warhammer won't be lacking at all either. The cons, even though that's the case, like we said before, does not crossover with the main attributes, so your gear is a bit more limited because of that. The weapons have slower animation, so just gotta be aware of that. You be a bit more methodical with how you use the weapons. And then lastly, it's a bit lower on the raw DPS. It's more of an off DPS tanky support, which isn't inherently a con if that's your playstyle or anything, but I do want to just take note. If you're looking for these crazy DPS builds, this is definitely not one of them. It's more so an off tanky support type thing. And then lastly, of course, the bonus points. If you rock this with this Death Knight armor that was leaked, super awesome. You feel more like the Huntman of the Wild Hunt. And also, if you pretend like you're riding a horse across the sky, go for it. But that's it. Those are this week's builds, inspired by the new armor sets, which has led me down into it being more inspired by the Witcher series. Let me know what you think though. I will be continuing this series with the next one having a more broad theme like the first one, but I want to have more fun with the second one, so this is why we did the Witcher stuff. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on these builds, what you think, like and don't like, and hopefully if you try them out in the launch, let me know. And if you're going to be like me and wait for the Void Gauntlet to come out and rock this vampire build, let me know as well, because I am seriously going to make this my build. You guys are going to see a lot of YouTube videos on it. I'm pumped about it. But either way, hope you all have a fantastic day.